You're about to listen to Shed, conversations about race on Martha's Vineyard, with your host, Eric Adams, a presentation of MVY Radio.
Dawn is an award-winning filmmaker and joins the podcast to tell us about the power of storytelling and describes how many of her films came to be, including her newest release, the Sing-Sing Chronicles, a film that spans 23 years following the story of JJ Velazquez, an innocent man who gains his freedom after being falsely imprisoned. Dawn shares some personal and poignant moments from the filming of Good Trouble, an incredible documentary about the life and times of an incredible man, U.S. Senator and civil rights icon John Lewis. Hello, and welcome to Shed. Today, our guest is Dawn Porter. Dawn is an American documentary filmmaker and the founder of the production company Trilogy. Her award-winning films include Gideon's Army, Spies of Mississippi, Trapped, Luther, Never Too Much, The Lady Bird Diaries, and Deadlocked: How America Shaped the Supreme Court. As a 3-time Sundance Film Festival director, Dawn's work has been featured on HBO, Netflix, Hulu, Showtime, CNN, PBS, MSNBC, MTV Films, and other platforms, if there are even any other platforms. Welcome to Shed, Dawn.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming in today. One of the things I didn't mention that's in my note is that you are a graduate of Swarthmore College.
I am.
And I know that you went to the Bronx Science School.
Bronx High School of Science.
So I'm imagining that was quite a different setting for you, going from Bronx to Swarthmore.
It definitely was. So Bronx Science is... In New York City, we have schools where you have to take a test to get into them. So it's a really great public high school. You know, it has, even though it says Bronx Science, it's just a really good high school.
Mm-hmm. It's a magnet school? Is that
it's
fair to
kind
say?
of I guess you would, I don't know if...
It draws kids from all over the city?
Yeah, it draws kids from all over the city. And I lived in the West Bronx, like Kingsbridge area near Riverdale. So I think sometimes people are like, "Oh, she grew up hard in the Bronx," mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's not really.
That wasn't your experience?
No, that wasn't what was happening. But Bronx Science is a really large high school. Mm-hmm. It was 3,000 kids at that time. So going to Swarthmore, and I was also very lucky. Sometimes you just let the luck of the draw works with you. And there were some good guidance counselors, and I got a great guidance counselor. And when I met with her, and we talked about what I was interested in and grades and da-da-da-da. And then she drew up a list of 5 schools, mm-hmm. And she says, "This is where you're going to apply." And so
were they all pretty small liberal arts schools?
Yeah, all pretty small. So it was like Swarthmore, Amherst, Dartmouth, and then there was like some that weren't quite as hard at that time to get into. And then for all of us, we would apply to the SUNY schools, state university schools, and that was. We felt like we had a good chance of getting in there. So then she said, you should go to the Swarthmore does an overnight for kids. You should go stay at the campus. And when I went to the campus, I was like, this is beautiful. Yeah. I love this. But Swarthmore really changed my life. And actually, Phil Weinstein was as an English professor there for many, many years. One of my favorite English professors, and he lives on island full time now.
Wow, you still in touch?
Oh, well, so a couple weeks ago, I was here for the Vineyard Film Festival, mm-hmm. A very, very fine film festival.
Yes, it is.
This island is so full of thoughtful, generous people, and so the family that owns the Sweet Life in OB mm-hmm. Said, hey, do you think, we were showing... Sing-Sing Chronicles, which mm-hmm. is a 4-part series about wrongfully convicted people and the reporter who helped free them. And she said, do you think you and JJ, who's our main protagonist, would you come we'll host a dinner. You know, they do it as kind of a fundraiser, but just have a conversation. So we go to the dinner. I was like, of course, that sounds really fun. And then who's there? Phil Weinstein.
Wow.
So it was pretty exciting to have. Phil Weinstein was the kind of professor, he would lecture the first part of class and no one would be late. You did not want to miss the lecture. It was just sculpted. I mean, it was just, he would speak about what we were reading, but also like philosophy and politics and how we could make sense of it. I mean, it was like church. And by the way, Lucky Islanders, he does do readings, he lectures here.
No kidding.
I would highly encourage you, I know that he's done some stuff at the Vineyard Haven Library, but if you get the chance, please listen to this man speak. He's got a lot to share.
And so that was life-changing.
Life-changing, super small classes, people who really pushed you to think. I've never been a better writer than when I was in college. You had to write all the time. We actually called Weinstein's class Long Works because it was like all the Russian books, like the Dostoevsky books. Tolstoy, right. But when you are building those muscles, weren't no chat GPT. You had to read the book and write from your brain. You get better at it just by being forced to do it. So, I really, really loved being there and made some of my best friends there and then kind of went out into the world.
So you think that prepared you for what came next with your education was Georgetown Law?
I realize how naive this sounds, but just picture, an 18-year-old goes to this marvelous place with small classes and you're reading and writing all the time and people actually care about what you think. And my other great love was ancient political theory. Really? With a professor called Ken Sharp. And Ken Sharp, kind of just made this period come alive. So I thought, I'm going to teach ancient political theory. I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to be the female Ken Sharp. I'm going to make people love philosophy. And so much so that I took his class as a seminar and then I asked if I could take it again. Because I was like, there's more to do here.
Did he look at you like, what's wrong with you?
No, he said, you could take the class and it was another seminar, which usually are 2 credit classes, for 1 credit. He was going to let me do it.
Wow.
And I was like, 1 guy, I know how much work that is. I'm not doing that. And he also said, the path is you have to learn ancient Latin and ancient Greek and then current Latin and because you need to read the original text. And I was like, I'm going to go to law school.
Wow.
So
seemed easier?
Seemed easier. So when I got to Georgetown, I thought that everybody was going for the reason I was going, that we just loved learning and investigating text, and then we were going to help people. And Georgetown was not like that. It was very oriented towards corporate law, like kind of really pushing us that way. Lots of people went another path, but...
How disappointed were you?
I was pretty disappointed, actually. The other thing that I had no experience of in college, like zero, was competition. At Swarthmore, no one ever asked me, what'd you get on that test? If you wanted to say, I'm really proud, there was a history class I was kind of struggling in, and I remember I finally got the coveted, A. It was an A-, but I just kind of burst out of class and my friends, and I said, I did it. But no one ever was like, how'd you do? What'd you get? It wasn't that. Swarthmore was your own experience. If you wanted to share something you were struggling with or you were proud of, great. But if not, it's do your thing. So you could be a geek and you could be a party person. That was me. I was a geeky party person. So Georgetown was just a lot of competition, kind of a, very hierarchical. Are you going to make law review? Are you going to make this? Or you make that? And it really took me a while to find it was the toughest. School was always my thing. And so it was the toughest educational experience. I really had a hard time at first until the whole first year I was whoa. And I intimidated myself. And, So no, it did not prepare me. But then I found my place. But it took much longer than it ever had in my entire life.
And it didn't knock you off course because you went on to become a practicing attorney.
I did. law school is expensive. And even though at that time, so I came out with like $60,000 in loans.
That seems like nothing.
I know.
Now.
It's
Wow.
like at the time was like, woof, you know. So I went to a firm. I got very lucky with the firm I went to. It was a big-ish firm. The founding city was in the Midwest, and I really think that kind of permeated the culture.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't kind of a banking competitive place. So I was pretty happy as a lawyer. I got, you know, I was a good writer. I you know, it was like, it's puzzles, you know. And then I also had some really good mentors there. And I made some of the best friends of my life. Like, we're still friends today.
Wow.
So, yeah, so you kind of find your way, you know, but it's not always easy.
So do you know a lot of attorneys with a bent toward ancient
Political theory.
Political theory
I
that
would
have
like you
become
all to
filmmakers?
know that Plato's Republic, he posits that women could be philosopher kings,
I did not know that.
which, right, it's interesting. And there's the raging debate there was at the time about whether he was joking.
No kidding.
I was like, I don't think Plato was joking.
He's not known for his humor.
He's not known
is
for
he?
his funny
No.
self. So that like really fascinated me.
Wow.
That people have been thinking about gender roles
Interesting.
back into the time of the ancient Greeks. So, but no.
So no.
No.
So how does that happen for you? How do you make that transition into filmmaking?
So I worked for the firm for 5 years, and then I was doing work for a partner, Henry Hoberman, who had a big First Amendment practice. And so, you know, I did some work for Henry. We defended newspapers. We defended journalists. Henry got hired as the head of litigation at ABC television.
Okay.
And after he got there, he said, do you want to come with me? Do you want to come here? And I thought, you know, my best friend at the firm had died very young. She was in her 30s. She died of ovarian cancer. And her death was such a shock to me. I didn't know anyone around my age. She was a little bit older than me, but around my age who died. And, you know, there's like that Red Hot Chili Pepper song, like this life is not a run through.
Yeah.
And it kind of just was like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't just go along and do the next thing that's expected. I should challenge myself, right? So I had kind of like made this pact with myself that I would do the next thing that was kind of frightening. And that was leaving DC, where I was very comfortable, leaving the firm where I was very comfortable, and starting over in New York. I was newly married, but I did it.
What did your family think of that?
You know, what was hard about it was, so my husband and I lived on Capitol Hill. My parents lived in Southwest DC, which was literally a 10-minute car ride. Right. My one sister lived 15 minutes away. You know, my other sister lived a half an hour away. They never said like, oh, don't do that. You know, we're not really that kind of family, but I think it was hard for everybody. Well, I think the other thing was both my sisters at that point had kids, and we did a lot as a whole family with all the kids. And actually all the kids are very close now to each other, like my kids and my sister's kids. So that really was a big thing. Is I really loved being an aunt. I really loved being around them and having them know me. You know, I missed that. But it was exciting to go. You know, I'm from New York City, so it was exciting to go home. This time I got to pick where I lived. So I lived in the Upper West Side, where I'd always wanted to live. It was not without its challenges, but it turned out to be a great decision.
And how did you find your way up to the island?
So my really good friends that we made in Washington, D.C. So in Washington, D.C. was a great place for young people. There's like so many free things. There's lectures, there's museums, there's, you know, we were marching all the time. Like, I feel like very, very often we were going to marches. Like there was the environmental march and the women's march and the this march.
Were you there for the 20th anniversary of the I Have a Dream March by any chance? I was at Howard during that time.
Yeah, I was not there. But like it was like our social life. Yeah. We would go to these events, you know, and we would march around and then we would go to the bars. So we made some very good friends. My husband also went to Georgetown Law School. and some like his best friend from the law school. We had like this group of young marrieds, and one of them, she grew up in Boston, coming to the island. And so right when we were moving to New York, the six of us rented a house together and came here. My husband had come while he was in college. He used to work here in the summers. He shucked oysters at the wharf.
Wow. It's the perfect summer job.
It was a perfect summer job. And then we just were like, whoa, what is this place?
It's something. It grabbed you, huh?
It really did. And so my son was born that was in 1998. I won't forget that because that's when I left the firm. And then my first son was born in 2001. And he was born in July. And I think we came the next summer, 2002. He's come every summer of his life.
And you spend a lot more time here now.
We spend a lot more time here. So we bought our place in 2011. So we're in West Tisbury, but Lambert's Cove area. And then during pandemic, we moved here, like a lot of people. We resisted the call to not move here. We were like, I am deeply going to my house, my own damn house. I'm going to my house.
And that was your first winter?
No, we love coming in the winter.
Okay.
So not a lot, but we always would come in the winter. So it's actually some of my favorite time is being here. It's super cold and it's, there's nothing like getting out in Main Street or going over to Edgartown and there's no one there and the stars and it's freezing.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
But we don't want to tell too many people that.
No, it's terrible. It's
right,
itchy.
right.
It's cold. It's icy. It's grim.
It's dark. Yeah.
Our experience of the island was when we were renting places, we start like most people with a week. It's not enough, right? By the time you start to relax, you go home.
That's right.
That's terrible. So then we did 2 weeks. Better.
But not good enough.
Not good enough. 3 weeks. Still not
You're getting
good
there.
enough.
You're getting there, though, right?
And my husband was like, what are we doing here? And I was like, well, we would move houses, So I was like, oh, well, we are going to go in March. We'll stay through the summer. We were living in San Francisco then. So I was like, and then we'll just go home. And we just never went home. But January rolled around.
That's the tough one.
And our friends had gone home. Our pandemic bubble had gone home. And did you know there's no food delivery here?
I do know that. I'm very aware of that. Painfully aware.
We hadn't thought about that. And there's no sitting outside.
Not a lot in January.
There's not going up to, Stanley's, which is my preferred lobster roll. So, and then we had 2 kids it gets dark at 4:30. I don't know if you knew that.
I do know that too.
So January, my older son was still in high school in California. So we rented a house and he was in boarding school actually. And the boarding school was so small that they had figured out how to bring the kids back. They had them come back. Everybody was in their own space. They had to isolate for 2 weeks. They could only go get their meal, bring it back.
God, remember that? Wow.
And then they, put up the gates. Nobody in, nobody out.
Yep.
And so he got to go to school. And because it's California, they could sit outside and do classes. So they didn't feel like they were in danger. And really, not very many kids got sick. And it certainly didn't spread. So I said to my husband, I was like, we should rent a house in Ojai. It's like the Martha's Vineyard of the West Coast. So I told my son, I was like, good news. We have rented a house right down the street from your boarding school.
Was that good news for him?
He was like, you're kidding. He was like, are you kidding? And I said, and even better, I'm going to teach. He was like, I will leave. I will leave if you do that. You cannot do that. I said, fine. But we did rent a house down there. So then we went there and we stayed. And then we came back in the spring, like in May. So we stayed there January to May.
I mean, the island has forever drawn creative people, artists, storytellers like yourself. Has that influenced you in your desire to be here?
1,000%.
Is that right?
I mean, coming here, I think, for me, I was just at a conference where it said use I statements. So I really, really enjoyed not just sitting on the beach or walks or, but I love going to the book talks. Yep. My husband will tell you about how many hours of his life he has spent finding a way to frame my entries into the fair. So particularly one memorable year, I'd taken the pictures, got the pictures printed, where there was only one place in this island to get your pictures printed, But then you have to, use that. They have one frame that you can use. So we're up and down because we were staying in West Tisbury, going down to me. I was like, can you drive me? I got to go get my picture frame. My husband's a pretty chill person. So he's like, yeah, la, la, la. Okay, we're going to get the picture frame, da, 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 da. But then it's like up and back and mounting. And then we have to stand.
August.
And it's August. And you got to up and down from West Tisbury to Main Street Park, get the picture
That's
frame.
asking a lot of your husband.
It's all day. And then you go stand in line with like a person holding a pumpkin and like whatever. And so he's waiting in line to submit my photographs to the fair. And he's like, did you see what first prize is? And it's $2.50. He's like, I was like,
Not
it's not
the
about
point.
the prizes.
Not the point.
It's not about
No.
the prizes, Dave. But I love all that stuff. I started volunteering with the Circuit Arts, This was a place to try new things, like go to Featherstone or do like hiking, which I don't otherwise like to do.
Does it get the creative juices flowing?
Oh,
up here?
completely.
Yeah.
Because you're relaxed. And, I think many of us have had the experience of you go to sleep and you wake up with an idea, like here you walk around and all of a sudden you get an idea. Or just, I really love just going to the beach. I could go by myself or I could go with, one of my favorite girlfriends who is like me. Like sometimes I like to talk and sometimes I just, like she will sleep. Dawn Davis is like one of my favorite girlfriends. During pandemic, we would, and Dawn Davis is a publisher. So we both were working and she would say, okay, come and meet me at the beach. We'll meet at 4:30 and we will work until 5:30 or 6. No talking. But we would bring rosé. And then right at 6, when it's, that time of day.
Perfect time.
And then we'd stay another hour with rosé and snacks. I'm like, what's better than that? Like
Nothing.
working next to your best friend, one of your best friends. So she's an editor. So she's, you can't see me, but I'm moving my hands very quickly. This is how she edits. She's like, turn the page, 3 seconds, turn the page, da, 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 scratch, turn the page. And I was like, who are you editing? She's like, Alice Walker.
What? You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
Wow.
She's just like, she can see and like make her notes really quickly.
Maybe should have spent a little more time with Alice Walker, don't you think?
She's like, we don't need that. But it was just fascinating to watch, her process, but also like to just spend time with someone you love.
Yeah.
Just being near someone you love is, and we have different disciplines, but I feel like they speak to each other. So like I always go and raid her house for new books or...
Any other collaborations that have happened as a result of being here?
Oh my goodness. Huge. John Forte, musician on island, plays with the Fugees, but does lots of other. So Lori David introduced us. I'd seen John at parties, but we didn't know each other well. And Lori just said, Lori had heard some of John's music. He lives up island, so he was friends with Chilmark people.
Chilmarkians.
Chilmarkians,
yes.
Because, you don't always go outside of your town.
It's true.
So I am an equal opportunity person. I go up and down.
Good for you.
I go all over except to Edgartown. I don't go there that much, like a little bit.
There's not much over
There's
there.
not much over there. So Lori had heard some of John's music and she knew some things I was working on. And she said, I just feel like you two should talk to each other. And so he came to my house, which is like what you do here. You just come to somebody's house. I was working on a short film about the artist Amy Sherald, who painted Michelle Obama's portrait.
Yes.
And she has a beautiful exhibit at the Whitney. If anybody's going to New York, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Amy does these life-size portraits in bright, brilliant colors of Black people. After Breonna Taylor was murdered, Amy was asked by Ta-Nehisi Coates to paint Breonna Taylor. And they were going to photograph the painting for the cover that he was guest editing this. And so Amy was looking for something to do to kind of express her rage and angst. And so she does this painting. And then they photograph it for the cover. But then she's like, I have a painting. What am I going to do with the actual painting? So Steven Spielberg and I think the Ford Foundation, there might be one other partner, they buy the painting.
Wow.
For $2 million.
Wow.
And give it to Amy. Amy donates all of that money, all of it, to a scholarship in Breonna Taylor's
Brianna's
name.
Oh, that is amazing.
So literally every time someone gets the scholarship, they say her name. But then Amy does more. She contacts the Speed Museum in Louisville, where Breonna lived, and she says, "Can you exhibit this painting? The people in her community should see this painting." And she says, "And actually, can you do a whole exhibition of other Black artists?" And they say, yes, we can.
Unbelievable.
And they mount this beautiful exhibit. I mean, big artists like Biggers and, just like major Black artists donate pictures to be, or lend pictures. And what it also does is it encourages Black citizens of Louisville to come to the museum that they had never been in. And the other thing that happened, we were making a film about this, the great Sheila Nevins of HBO had seen this, like literally ripped an article from the New York Times about this painting and mailed it to me. And she said, "You should make a film about this and I will pay for it."
And that's what you did?
Okay. So it turns out that Breonna Taylor's mother, and this is why I have hope for our society, after she was killed, people started sending her drawings and pictures and paintings of Breonna. They just picked them up and they would like Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, Louisville, Kentucky. She now has a whole room of this art. And so Amy's portrait is certainly one of the most famous. But Tamika Palmer says, "I never thought about how art could be so healing for me, to have her with me and to know that she touched people, to take the time to draw her or paint her and then gift it to me."
That's powerful.
So she created this whole room of these, and you would think it would make her sad. And she said, "No, it makes me feel like I'm with her and people cared about her."
Oh, I love that, Dawn.
So this is what I'm making a film about. And we had just done the shoot and we had, our first rough cut. And I show some scenes to John Forte, and he says, "I know just what I would do with that." And some music that he was working on. So he ends up scoring the whole movie.
No kidding.
No kidding. And then we got commissioned again by HBO to do the next installment of Eyes on the Prize, the legendary civil rights series. So I go back to John because we had such a good time together. And I said, "Can you do some music?" It was 6 hours. "Can you do some music for one of the hours?" And he said, "I would like to do it for all of the hours."
Oh, my God.
And I was like, "Okay, but that's a lot of music."
Ask, yeah.
So we would be in his Go-Go's basement, where is his studio, and looking at scenes. And then John is scoring. He scored the whole series.
Unbelievable.
Which is now on HBO Max. And then John says to me, a big question for us was the theme song to Eyes on the Prize. If you know it, is really iconic.
Yep.
The one thing we did right and the time we decided to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. So I was like, we were really thinking like, what do we do? So many people know that song. They love that song.
It's an anthem.
It's an anthem. And John said, I have an idea. So he does a new arrangement, and it's a little hip-hoppy. It turns out one of the characters in our series is this woman, Miss Mary. It turns out she has a beautiful voice. Like, she sang one of the answers to the questions of the director of that episode. And, John was like, "There's a young girl on island, Fiona, and she has a beautiful voice. I think we should have Fiona and Miss Mary, intergenerational, sing my new arrangement." And so that's what we did.
Come on.
So Fiona was 12. And so then John...
Had she recorded anything up to that point? This was her first?
She's Kate Taylor's granddaughter. So she comes by her talent easy. And then John was like, "And we have to go to New Orleans to record it." I'm still not sure why we had to go to New Orleans to record it, but we all trooped down to New Orleans. Fiona is brought by her mother. And then John found this choir of other young people, and Miss Mary came, and we recorded the theme song.
Oh, that's amazing.
Episode 3 of Eyes.
Well, I know what I'm watching tonight. Because I've seen most of your movies, but I have not seen that episode. I've not seen the Breonna Taylor movie, too, so that's now on my list.
Yeah.
I think the first one that I did see was actually your first movie, which was Gideon's Army. Yeah. And I didn't know anything about it. Didn't know that it was really came from this idea of having a right to a public defender. And I fell in love with Travis. I really did. And Brandy,
June.
I really did. I was
Thank
I got my
you.
checkbook out, and I need to know where to send these checks to these people because, wow, they're heroes in what they do. They really are.
They absolutely are. And, the time that we're living in, when we think about who is really standing up, it's people in the courts.
Definitely.
It's the ACLU.
Yes. You feeling hopeful?
I went to Yoga Barn this morning, so I'm in a good
helps. Mood. Yeah, that definitely
Thank you,
helps.
Bonnie.
I also fell in love with the John Lewis movie, Good Trouble. And I know he's someone who's spent a little time on the island. He was here. My mother-in-law actually has a picture with him that she's very proud of. Yeah. And I've heard you talk before a little bit about your experiences with him, and I wondered if you'd share a little bit about that, because I feel like, what we need now more than ever is the spirit, the tenacity, the stamina, the strength of someone like John Lewis.
He is very, very much missed, his own presence and his spirit. And it was really heartwarming to hear Senator Cory Booker.
Yes, it was.
Kind of do the callback. And that was quite sincere. One of the things I do know about Mr. Lewis is when, the squad, when AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, when they were elected, Congressman Lewis met with them. And one of the things that he told them, we weren't allowed to film this, unfortunately, but I knew that it had happened. And he told them, your role is different now. You are used to being the activist knocking on the door of the halls of power. You are now the power.
Interesting.
And so, your job is to figure out how to advance from within. A lot of that is that requires cooperation. And I think if he were here, he would be able to really, kind of continue to beat that drum, because it's very hard to cooperate right now. But, John Lewis
see them doing that too. We see AOC particularly now doing that.
I know that he, really forcefully, instilled that need into them. So there were so many things that he did that we don't know, but he had spoken to Brandy and Travis and June, the lawyers in Gideon's Army. He addressed them.
I remember.
So that was the first time I was in his presence and met him. And then I made a series called Bobby Kennedy for President, which is very, very good.
They're all very, very good, Dawn. They
it's
really
on Netflix.
are.
And I didn't know that John Lewis had organized a rally. After he was kind of pushed out of SNCC, he went to work for Bobby Kennedy and volunteered for his campaign. And he had organized a rally in Indianapolis. It happened on the day that Dr. King was murdered.
No kidding.
And so 24-year-old John Lewis, his young organizer, so they get word before Senator Kennedy was to come to address the crowd in this black neighborhood. It was John Lewis's work. And a lot of the white organizers were saying, we don't know, there's going to be riots. It's very dangerous. You shouldn't do it. And John Lewis said, you must speak to them tonight. And it is the only time that Senator Kennedy spoke publicly about his brother's murder.
No kidding.
And he said, I know your anger. My brother was killed by a white man.
Wow.
And Indianapolis is one of the only cities that did not burn that night. So, causality, coincidence, but it feels like it had something to do with it. Acknowledging people's pain, acknowledging the rage, but saying, I really feel you, People always say to me, like, how'd you get John Lewis to a movie? And I swear this is what happened. Like, we, just arranged a call, and I said, Mr. Lewis, you've done so many things. I'd really like to make a documentary. And he said, okay.
Just like that. Did he know who you were?
He knew a little. I think John Lewis was the most easygoing. One of the many, many things I really, they say, like, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Like, he's the opposite. Like, he exceeded my expectations. And
that comes through in the movie.
He was, really worked at being a joyful person.
Yeah.
And one of the things he would say all the time, because this was during, Trump won. And I would say, oh, I'm so worried about kids in cages and the Muslim ban and all the terrible things he was doing the first time. And, Mr. Lewis would be like, well, we can do this tomorrow, and then we do this, and da-da-da-da. And one thing, you cannot never let people make you bitter, because that's when they win, when they change who you are. I do think about that a lot. I don't know how well I'm doing.
I feel the same way. I feel like it's really almost impossible not to be dragged down, but yet I feel bad when I feel full of hatred or anger.
That's right.
Or angst.
And that's another thing I'm angry about,
Yeah.
that they're making me bitter and mistrustful and all of that. And he really believed that is when we lose, because that's when you lose your joy. So I would go home and I would be like, well, Congressman Lewis says. My husband's like, John Lewis is like your life coach. like
Not
okay,
not a bad
John
life
Lewis
coach,
says.
though.
John Lewis says.
What was interesting, too, is that not only did you get John Lewis, but you got his sisters and his brother, who were able to talk about him as a child, which I'd never heard anything about that. So you really got a deep understanding of how he got to be the man he was.
Well, I don't think anybody had asked them how they felt. He hadn't heard them speak. He's very, very proud. See, I still talk about him in the present sense, because he's kind of...
I like that, though.
But he so proud that his family still owned the land in Georgia. And his sister, who has since passed, so thank goodness we have her on film, right? So she was in the house, the family house. And so we took him there. My challenge with Congressman Lewis was always getting him to look back and, was there something else that we could kind of draw out? I was always thinking about I would and he would always say yes. I was like, Mr. Lewis, can we come to your house? And he's like, yep. I'm like, can we come at 8 a.m.? He's like, yep. Okay. Can we stay with you election night? Yep. We left him.
Wow.
Election night, I was like, I am tired.
You got to go.
It is 1 a.m. and they're not calling these races. And we left him clapping and but when we went to his house, I swear there is something holy there. So we literally, it's the South. So miraculously, there's a table filled with food. And then all of a sudden, some people that had been in high school with him came over, including a former teacher.
Wow.
And they sat around and told stories. And so between his teachers and his siblings, they would say they would listen to the radio and hope not to hear his name. Because if they heard his name, it was probably going to be that he was injured. While we spoke with his siblings, he was just quiet the whole time. He just listened. I saw him do that all the time. We would go someplace. The first person he would greet was the person sweeping the floor or setting out the water.
Yeah.
He would stop and speak to everybody who wanted to speak to him. So it was so much that we learned to give extra time going through the airport. We made a scene out of it.
I was amazed by the different type of people, age, race, they all
very,
knew who he was,
that was
and he obviously
true.
meant a lot to them.
He meant so much.
And
to
he
so
was
many
funny.
people.
I mean, he was a very funny man too, which I never got that
So
sense. He was always
funny.
seemed so serious.
No, so funny. Not only, people saw his viral dancing. He loved to dance. He loved music. He loved singing. Oh my goodness. Love singing. But
A joyful guy.
Joyful man. And he would do something that he thought was funny. If we had cameras, and he'd be like, did you get that? I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, we did.
So a performer as well.
Oh yeah. He was like he would do something, say, when he says his sister said that she was telling him stories about home, and she said her chickens were fighting, and he said, my chickens are nonviolent. And then he was like, did you go? Yes, sir. Yes, we did. He was so pleased with himself when he got the opportunity to make that kind of joke.
That's nice. That's nice. And we get to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be my favorite of your films. I mean, they're all, the ones that I've seen have all been great. But the latest one, Sing-Sing Chronicles, to me was incredibly powerful. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how that came to be. Because actually in the film, you show that you're starting down a road of making one film, and then this film kind of jumps into to place.
So I had done this film, The Way I See It, about President Obama's White House photographer. And we released it during pandemic. So it was supposed to go to Focus Features and be like kind of a real theatrical release. And then, of course, there were no theaters.
Yeah.
So it ended up going to MSNBC. And then it did really well for them. Like, I think John Lewis and The Way I See It are the two movies I hear about that people watch over and over.
Okay.
You know, so I had this relationship with MSNBC after that. And so NBC News Studios, which started the Sing-Sing Chronicles project, reached out. I get a lot of people coming because I'm a lawyer and they, know I'm interested in these kinds of stories. So their pitch is, our reporter filmed for 20 years and we have all that footage of these 6 men and his quest to get them out of prison. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing that. 20 years of footage. So his name is Dan Slepian. He is a Dateline and an NBC reporter. He works a lot with Lester Holt. And so baby Dan, was a baby reporter at NBC. I think he wasn't quite supposed to be doing this, but he had gotten permission to embed with the NYPD.
Which that was impressive.
Which was very impressive that he got that permission. And then he thought, it was the original ride-alongs. He's going to see them solving crimes and putting bad guys away. And he asked these 2 cops, white Irish cops, and that I think that is relevant. It's kind of, cops, live in outer boroughs. And he says, what's the case that keeps you up at night? And they say, it's these 2 people we think are innocent. And we want to put the right people in jail and get the right people out. And I think that's really important to think about. Like I certainly am critical of police who abuse their authority, but there are lots of police who take their job seriously and they do not want the wrong people in jail. There certainly are people like that. So Dan says, well, that's fascinating. Can I follow you? And he does. And it takes years, but the guys get out of jail and the police do. But a lot happens, and it's very disappointing to the police officers how long it takes and what happens. But those people who get exonerated introduce Dan, the reporter. They are so grateful. They introduce Dan to this man, JJ Velazquez, and they say he is innocent too.
Because they were in serving time with him.
They were in serving time together. Right. David Lemus, one of the men. And so Dan meets JJ, and he's kind of skeptical because at this point, Dan thinks this is a unicorn. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. So he starts following JJ's case, and JJ then was working in the law library, trying to free himself, trying to get himself out. And so when he would meet someone who would say, I am innocent, if he really believed them and kicked the tires on their cases, he would introduce them to Dan. And so over the course of these 20 years, JJ's work, lawyers, and Dan's reporting, 6 men are freed.
Yes. While JJ stayed.
JJ's the last person to get his freedom. So we brought JJ here to the Vineyard, and he was here for the festival.
He's an impressive guy.
He's a great guy. He had a very good time here.
Good.
Like he
Excellent.
just, loved the island. He was staying over in Edgartown. And
I had a chance to meet him, and he seemed like that thing that happens that you described what the Vineyard was getting to him. He said, I think I'm coming back in August. I said, I know you're funny, coming back in August.
So then Vineyard people, they're like competing for him. Like literally like this one person, I don't know who this was, but, was very kind. And I hear, she goes up to him, she goes, I know you have a lot of offers, but like we have a place, we're very centrally located.
I got to be honest. I said the same thing to him. I said, we got a little apartment downstairs. It's all yours if you want it. And he said, all these people, they don't know me. And they're all opening up their house. And I said, listen, man, that's part of the charm of this place.
That is exactly.
There is a sense of community.
I was so proud of this island because as you can imagine, this person has suffered so much.
Yes.
And so I never want to put anybody who has suffered that much in a position where people would treat them not with the utmost respect.
Agreed.
But I feel safe bringing people here.
100%.
And everyone rose to the occasion. They cried, they laughed, they were respectful. They asked respectful questions about his experiences.
He got a standing ovation at the screening that I was at with you.
And so he had a really, they had,
He
so
seemed
they
like
are
he
coming
was
back.
feeling the love. Good.
Yep. So
That's
they're coming in
great.
July. I think, they're going to look at their offers.
I hope so. I'm sure I'm way down on the list. He started talking about some places in downtown Edgartown. I said, okay, you can go there, but you need to come back over this way in the summertime. So in the movie, you're following along all these different cases, and here comes another person that was wrongfully convicted and spent years. Here comes another one. But you also see that there is a ton of resistance to really looking at these things closely by the system, both by some individuals. There were certain, the district attorney, but also by the system that just did not want to acknowledge that they had made a mistake. And I've asked you this question once before, and you said you get asked this a lot, but I think it's worth us listening to the answer. What is our problem with freeing innocent people from jail?
It is something that people ask a lot because we find it so hard to believe. Yeah. The first time we talked about this, we did not have the examples that we have now of how hard it is to get people who are actually innocent of anything freed from, being whisked off of the streets and put into torturous prison conditions. Mm-hmm. And I think that is shocking a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's almost beyond comprehension that anyone could make this argument that they could be so cruel and indifferent. I think people really have a hard time believing that anyone is innocent. The accusation is enough. Mm-hmm. And so they just don't believe it. Mm-hmm. And it's easier for people to say, well, a jury will decide. Mm-hmm. And they keep kind of kicking it down the road. When you think about how arrests are made, it's the police. It's totally their judgment.
That's right.
So, but then you're supposed to have the prosecutor, kind of really evaluate the facts. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen enough. Or the prosecutor says, if I'm wrong, then maybe a dangerous person is released. So just go to the jury.
Right.
95% of the cases don't get to a jury because the prosecutor, if you're facing 15 to life and they offer you anything less than 15 and you're sure to get out, what's the rational thing to do?
Well, yeah. And so an innocent person is incentivized in many ways to plead guilty to something to avoid the potential of long-term jail time or going through a trial that they don't have the money for. I think I've heard that, up to, 80 to 90% of people that are in jail right now are there just because they don't have the money to bail out.
Yep.
And also, you say we're shocked to see this, but also we know very well that there are lots of innocent people that have gone to jail for a long time, that is in some ways how the system was designed to work, no?
When JJ was here, he has since become a prison reform advocate and a, advocate for the wrongfully incarcerated. And what he said is, I think the estimates are that it's 10% of people are wrongfully convicted.
Wow.
Because the United States has more than 2 million people in prison. That's 200,000 people. And, it goes back for me, to Gideon's Army. Most people cannot afford a lawyer.
Right.
And so the first thing that happens is what you said. You can't make bail, you go to jail. And then you have a bigger incentive to plea. Your life is destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, once you plead guilty and you're a felon, you can't live in public housing.
Right.
You can't get student loans.
Can't vote.
You can't vote. Mm-hmm. So all of the things that could lift you out of poverty, because it's usually a poverty issue, you got two hands tied behind your back. So what are you going to do? You're probably going to resort to crime because you have no other choice. You can't get an education or live in decent housing.
Do you think that's by design, Dawn?
I haven't quite gotten that far yet. What I do think is understanding the results of the system as it is certainly informing people who are doing these terrible things by design. It is not an accident that we are shipping people from other countries outside of the jurisdiction of the United States.
It's not an accident that they just happen to be brown people either.
That's right. And it is not an accident that even when there's actual innocence. Once upon a time, actual innocence was the bright line.
Yeah.
That they don't care. And so the more optimistic side of me says, well, now people understand what due process is. I bet most people were not talking about due process. And I've been very heartened to see people say, I don't care if they did commit a crime. We still have a proceeding.
That's right.
To
It's not about the
determine.
person. It's about the
That's
system
right.
and how it's working
That's
or
right.
not working.
So it's certainly cold comfort to the 261 people who are in that prison, and the dehumanization of people photographing them
Unreal.
with what's her face cosplaying in front of them.
Like trophies.
It is just like physically, physical disgust that someone could be that cruel.
So, Dawn, I mean, so many of your films deal with racial social justice. Was that instilled by your family? Did you come to that on your own?
I think it's a combination. My great-grandfather is Ben Robeson, who's brother of Paul Robeson.
Really?
And so we definitely...
Another islander. Paul Robeson spent time
My
on
mother
the island.
recently sent me a picture of Uncle Paul, is what she calls him, on island.
Wow.
Which is a beautiful picture.
Wow.
I mean, my parents grew up in Harlem, and it was kind of idyllic how they grew up. One thing, I'm not in favor of segregation, but what happened for my mother was they lived in a mixed income community. My mother's father was a doctor, but they lived with people who were post people and they, who were housekeepers, and they lived together. And so you saw a lot of different people. But my grandmother was very close to Uncle Paul, and he used to go to her house and meet Harry Belafonte
Wow.
and folks and have conversations because her house was not bugged. And so my mother and her brothers grew up listening to them talking about the work they were doing. And then a very deeply kind of scarring and, story in my family is when his passport was taken, because it really did lead to his mental decline. And actually the last picture of Paul Robeson that we know about is him holding me as a baby.
You're kidding, Dawn.
I'm not.
You have that picture?
I do. My grandmother took my mother and baby me to meet him. And he had been kind of closeted and hermited for that. So he came outside, which they thought was it was like a way to draw him outside into this. He was living in Philadelphia with his sister.
So it's in your blood.
So that's there. And then I really think I had a great education, and I think when you read philosophy and you start to think about how people are treated, it does kind of seep in.
Yeah.
It's funny, like in the 80s, there was like this period where things felt possible for a lot of people. And, that was kind of my formative high school, college years. So when you start to see things that are not happening that you think should, you just start responding. But I think really because I'm a lawyer, I thought, I think I can help people understand some of these legal issues and, that I could be helpful that way. And then it was I just kept going.
Dawn, you're such a great storyteller.
Thank you.
And really, particularly as it pertains to this country's history. And what we're seeing now is that this country's history is really under attack and being changed and shaped to fit a new narrative.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about why it's so important that we keep telling these stories?
I think that there are a lot of myths, and there is a deep desire on the part of people who are not for equality to rewrite history so that this does not seem like the departure that it is. And so, I did this series, we did a series, huge team effort. It's called Deadlocked. It's on Showtime and Paramount Plus, but it's about how the Supreme Court from 1954, how do we go from the Supreme Court that gives us Brown v. Board of Education to the Supreme Court that overturns Roe v. Wade?
Yeah.
And so what you see in that history is, and it's really fascinating, the Supreme Court before the 1950s, before the Warren Court, it was really concerned with economic issues. Could you do tariffs? Could you do trade? Could, you impose taxes? And then the Warren Court, Earl Warren was the governor of California. He gets appointed to the court, and he's a Republican. No one thinks Earl Warren is going to be the champion of civil rights, but the court starts granting certiorari in cases that deal with the rights of the individual. And they continue to do that. And that is why we have, the right to counsel. That is why we had Roe v. Wade. That is why we had protections from search and seizure. So all the things that impact people happen during this Warren Court era. And then there is such a strong reaction to that from Nixon. Nixon gets to appoint 4 justices. And people don't remember that. They don't all turn out to be, Clarence Thomas, but they're not raging ACLU liberals, So you have this moderating, quote unquote, kind of impact. And then the court has a bit of stability for, about 11 years. And then the rightward shift starts. And then, Merrick Garland not being appointed was huge. RBG not stepping down was huge. I'm a huge fan of RBG. But, I think there are some really critical choice points that happened that lead us to where we are today.
Dawn, it's been great having you. I could do this for another hour, but I know, we both have things to do. But I would like to just ask you, what you think, what John Lewis would tell us if he could today.
I know exactly what Mr. Lewis
would he
would
say?
say. He would say, you can never give up. You can never give in. You keep your eyes on the prize. You keep going. You do not become bitter or hostile. You lead with love. Mr. Lewis, one of the most beautiful things about him was he always assumed the best of people. You had to show him that you did not have good intentions. But he started from the place that everyone wanted good things for themselves and for other people.
Well, we got some folks out there showing us that they have bad intentions.
And, to those people, he'd be like, well, it's on.
Dawn, thank you very much for joining us on Shed.
Thank you for having me again.
We look forward to more from you. Okay.
Take care.
All right. Bye. Thanks for listening to Shed. In addition to you, the audience, we'd like to thank some of the folks who help us put this podcast together and bring it to you. Amy Schumer and Martha's Vineyard's own Chris Fisher. Dana Edelman for providing that funky music to start us and take us out. We'd like to thank Ray Whitaker for providing all the expertise behind the microphone. And of course, none of this would be possible and wouldn't have happened if Dana Nunes didn't stand up.
You've been listening to Shed, conversations about race on Martha's Vineyard, with your host, Eric Adams. A presentation of MVY Radio.